There we go. So this is actually a special meeting. It's not our regular April meeting, but it's the April 4th meeting of the Planning Commission. It is 7:07, and we'll call ourselves to order at 7:07. Item 1 is to review the agenda for additions, removals, or adjustments. I have nothing. Does anybody else have anything? Melissa, did you have your hand up, or you're muted? No, Melissa, you're muted.
Got it. I found it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think my computer has finally died, so I had to get on my phone.
Okay. Hearing nothing to change or consider on the agenda, we will move on to continuing business, which is the continuation of the bylaw modernization grant work with Addison County Regional Planning. And Adam's here to lead the discussion.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Let's see, so thank you. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to get you some maps. There are some maps in the room. Basically, we are looking at the HDR district. So, there we go. Okay. What? Okay, I need to make them bigger. But not so big that they go out of the picture. Oops. Let's see. Slide.
On the right.
On the right.
Middle, up.
That's the vertical.
There you go. Oh, that centers it. That's good. Do that again. And then I just start losing it. Also,
Right, you got horizontal and verticals, maybe is what's going down. Don't use your slide bar. I can see it now on the very bottom, like lower right. I believe that's what I can see. Oh, that might be the top of the house. I can't tell.
Can we guess
That's
we don't
okay.
see people?
I'm gonna get us. You can see the people off to the side.
Can we guess we don't see them? Because then you would see your whole screen there.
Well, I can probably get them. Yes. Here. Okay. So this is your village planning area. Right now we are looking at the HDR district, which is the blue district. If you go to the middle of the blue district, right about North Street, right about there, we took some samples basically of the district to illustrate what the district lots look like. So there it is. You can see it's a block of high density residential district. Pleasant Street, Taylor Ave, Elm Street, North Street. There are 15 units, 15 structures in there. This was one that, let's see, the Forum on Sprawl studied for you in 2007. So we chose it again because we had some historical data on it. This is the same block, but it gets a little bit to the dimensional standards that we're talking about. So if you see, the roads are basically in what I'll call pink or gray. And that's a 40-foot setback. You get to the yellow and that's a 45-foot setback. You get to the green and that's a 50-foot setback. So basically what this is showing us is that you currently have a 40-foot setback from the principal dwelling. And basically in this district, none of your structures are in it. If you moved your district back a little bit, you'd start getting the front of structures violating your setbacks. So what that tells me is most of the units in this district are going to be fine. You can see across the street, there are a couple that do get into the gray, but basically by leaving it at 40, leaving your to the front yard setback at 40 feet, basically you're going to be okay. So that's something I would not recommend changing. The two lots that are in, I'll call it purple or red, basically violate your frontage requirements. So they have less than 75 feet of frontage. So one of the things that you might consider is, if there are a number of units in your district that are violating one of your dimensional standards, moving that dimensional standard. So for example, if you moved that to 60 feet, basically both of those lots would become conforming lots. And remember, most of these lots were probably created prior to the time that you created your zoning. So they didn't really do anything wrong. They were like that, and the zoning came in and changed them. Now they're pre-existing conforming lots, so they have some rights, but it would be easier to do things on them if you made them conforming. So one of the recommendations for your dimensional standards that I would have for you is to consider reducing your lot frontage to 60 feet.
So just a little input on these two lots. I have to live on the backside of these two lots. That is literally my house where my cursor is right now.
Okay.
And so this lot here, the one with exactly 60 current feet. There is no travel between these. There's a fence that runs between those two homes. They can hardly get between their house and that. And when he drives his pickup on the other side, there's a fence on this side. To drive a pickup between the end of his house to get to his garage, shed building where he runs where he keeps his stuff, like his boats, it's pretty tight. So people really should go look at that particular lot to see what 60 feet real, and that's a tiny little narrow house. So that's my only input on that. And I'll leave it with that.
Okay.
So you want to take these one at a time, or how do you want to?
Let's basically do just a little bit of an overview if we can.
Yeah.
And then I think what I'll come back is I would tell you, because I would tell you your lot coverage ratios. So how much impervious surface you have on each lot. Generally, you've got a 50% in this district, you've got a 50% lot coverage ratio. And none of these are close to the 50% lot coverage ratio. I would say that you can keep that, and that works for you. Your lot depth is 75 feet. I would tell you basically all of the lots meet your lot depth requirements. So I would not have you change the lot depth requirements. So lot coverage, lot depth, front yard setback, basically all seem to work for you in this district. So I wouldn't change them. Things that I would suggest you consider are the lot frontage, which we just talked about. Residential lot size. So you have a 10,000 square foot minimum. Basically, in this district, most of these lots meet your minimum lot size, but not quite all of them. There are a couple of them that are less than 10,000 square feet, more than 8,000 square feet. I would suggest you consider 8,000 square feet as a minimum lot size. Again, it makes lots, conforming lots that aren't in your village district, so it matches some of the fiber and brings some people into conformance. If you consider an acre a little bit more than 40,000 square feet, it brings your density basically up to 5 units per acre for single family homes. That is what's being talked about in the current legislation with that's in the legislature now, S100. They talk about areas, downtowns, generally with water and sewer, and I recognize Bristol does not fall into that, or most of Bristol does not
Water
fall.
or is it and or?
No, and sewer, at least it was as of last writing, right?
Right, as a Friday.
Well, that was always a question because that wasn't clear if it's water and sewer or water or sewer.
I believe it's and, so most of Bristol is not covered by that. But it's something to consider. It's one of the standards that the state is looking at, and I guess I would suggest that it's something for you all to consider. Let's see. Going down, your side yard setbacks are 15 feet for principal dwellings, 10 feet for accessory dwellings. Generally seems to work for at least this block, the existing structure. Oh, and I would say your setbacks, your front yard setbacks, and one of the standards that we incorporated into your ADUs is that basically accessory dwellings need to be 20 feet behind the principal front line.
That's with all accessory.
All accessory structures. And that's what we incorporated into your accessory dwelling unit.
And I've always been a little confused by that. I mean,
Okay.
is that presupposing that somebody might set a structure like that in front of the house?
Yes,
But that would presume, I guess, that the house is set really deep on the lot, unusually deep on like most of these, I guess.
well, most of these are actually pretty close right up to the front of the lot, but you know, you could envision a structure that was back a little further and somebody wanting to put the garage right on the road or something like that. And this would just a detached garage, and this would require that the garage be moved.
Or even right next to it. Like, again, you look along North Street, all of these structures, placing the garage right next to it. What the intent was when we wrote that was to pull all the secondary structures behind the front to give more of the house more of the prominence.
So that would be pre-existing conditions would be the concern there if you had an existing house where to put the garage. And the other thing is with that setback, you're keeping the vibe or the, I don't call it vibe, but the whole nature of the existing
Fabric of the village.
fabric of the village consistent too.
Yes, I think that's its intended purpose. So I was noting it because we've incorporated it into your ADUs. I would recommend that you keep it for those reasons. Building height, again, it's 35 feet. Tell you most of your houses are 35 feet. There are certainly some exceptions, but most of them comply with that. And again, we have accessories would be 20% less than basically your primary building. That's something that we built into the accessory
Isn't the height
dwelling unit.
being toyed with on in S100 as well, or they scrapped that finally?
Last I knew it was being toyed with as well.
Because they were looking at making it a 3rd story plus roof versus right
Well, they
now.
were giving them some sort of, I'd call it a density bonus or a height bonus if you meet certain beneficial, requirements, or reduce, like, if you can go one height higher, one story higher.
Because I mean, the history behind 35 feet was, that was biggest ladders the fire department owns. We still do. So that was, to be able to get on a roof, you don't want to exceed that 35 feet, was what the logic was.
I would just flag something and say that, like, 35 feet seems totally appropriate right downtown in the downtown district, basically. I think the Dunshee block currently is 35 feet, so that's just an example, if you're looking for something about that height. But back in the village, it seems kind of high, I mean.
Well, we've got three that I mean, how high is your house? It's gotta be close to 35, it's 5.
35 feet.
And across the street, the old Crystal Palace, you've also got the house on the corner, Pleasant and Maple.
Right,
That's nice.
so maybe that's not so unusual.
So you've got a lot of big 3-story Victorians in Bristol.
Yeah.
In your village, so, but I think most of them meet that, I don't think most of them exceed it, there are probably a couple that do. Again, pre-existing non-conforming structures, so I'm not necessarily, recommending that you increase it, you're right, the legislation does have some bonuses that we could look into if you all wanted to do that. So, and then the biggie, I guess, I talked a little bit about 10,000 square feet versus 8,000 square feet earlier. The residential density, if you went to 8,000 square feet, you could increase that to 5 units, 5 dwelling units per acre, if you chose to. Then the next question would be, do you want to vary the density requirements for duplexes and or multifamilies? So would you like to make it more permissive, some type of sliding scale? And that's a strategy that Heinsberg has adopted, for example. And then the last thing in this district is the footprint and the structure. And it says footprint and / structure, and I assume that's footprint of structure, and it's 5,000 for, and I'd like to clarify that, so make it footprint of structure, 5,000 for a single family principal dwelling, and then it's currently 1,000 for an accessory. We went to 900 for an accessory dwelling. It may be that's something that you want to consider there.
How much?
900
So we want to get 900 for an ADU. This is
for an ADU, yes. But this would make it 900 for an accessory. If you think a garage is 25 by 25, it's 500 and something. So there's certainly more than that. It's 525. So I guess let's see if we can get a couple easy wins here first. And the things that I recommended that you keep that we say are okay: your lot depth, your lot coverage, your front yard setback, basically your side yard setback, side yard, rear yard setbacks, the height, the footprint of structure. Basically, well, actually, I changed that slightly. So let's say building height, side yard, rear yard, front yard, setback, lot coverage, lot depth. Is everybody okay with keeping those the same? Do we understand what I'm talking about and why I'm recommending that?
When you say keep them the same as they currently are, or keep them the same as what you're suggesting of lowering some of those?
No, I am not suggesting lowering any of those. I'm suggesting keeping each of those different dimensional standards in your zoning regulations the same.
Okay.
Because they all work. They all basically reinforce the structure of your existing village fabric. So I don't see any reason to change them.
Does anybody else want to weigh in on that?
You did recommend reducing the minimum lot size from 10,000 to 8,000.
So that's not part of the question.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure on your list. I wasn't sure I heard that or not.
Not yet. The ones that I'm proposing to change, I'm gonna take one by one and then
So,
and do them
we're
later.
not talking about the no changes right now.
Gotcha, I wasn't sure.
I had a
Sounds like-
question. I'm sorry if
Sure,
I've
go
missed,
ahead.
if I've missed this before, but an ADU, does that have to be on top of another structure, or can that just be a separate structure on the property?
It can just be a separate structure, or it could be inside the existing main structure.
Okay, thank you.
Or a combination, if somebody could put an addition on and include part of the existing house plus the addition as an ADU.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, sounds like we're okay with all that then.
Okay, good. Great, so now I've got 4 others that I want to talk about with you, and we'll take those one by one. So, let's go with the lot frontage first. Again, you're currently at 75 feet. The 2 lots highlighted in red, purple, on that map are examples. They're about 60 feet. I am suggesting you might change it to 60 feet to make those lots also conforming lots within the village. It would make them easier to develop.
Adam, Fred Baser, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. When you say easier to develop, when we have lots built back in the, early 1900s that don't conform, what disadvantage are they for adding a 900 square foot apartment for a mother-in-law or whatever it was on the back of their home versus if it was, conforming as you're suggesting? What is the disadvantage to them?
So I would tell you, pre-existing non-conforming lots generally can't get a permit by right from the zoning administrator. They will need to go to in front of the development review board to get a waiver of a setback potentially, or of whatever dimensional standard they can't meet. So rather than being able to go to Chris for a permit, they have to go through a hearing process for something all of their other neighbors could just go to Chris for a permit for. So it's a little bit more time.
Yeah, so even if what they were proposing to do met the other pieces, keeping it so many feet from an adjoining property owner, the size, the height, and everything else was conforming, they're at a disadvantage because of of what was done 100 years ago on that property. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, after it was, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Go ahead, John.
Doesn't seem like it's much of a disadvantage. First of all, non-conformities are a minority of all properties. Like on this block, there's 2 out of whatever, how many, 10 houses. And I would hate to lower our standards to the lowest common denominator, including things that are non-conforming under the current rules, in order to squeeze in the 2/10 of, 2 out of 10 that are non-conforming. When, say one of these homes in red here on this map wanted to do something that was otherwise by right, I think they would get a friendly reception. I mean, considering it was, a normal kind of project, they weren't going to build a stadium or something, but getting that review is not a unhelpful process. It's not that much of a burden. And I would hate to do the lowest common denominator on all properties just to squeeze in those non-conforming ones that were built outside of the rules or when there weren't rules.
So, okay, Slim, what do you think?
I lean again more toward with John Moyers there because I take a lot of walks around the village. I think the density is close enough for most people's pleasure in this village, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities for ADUs in many, many lots. And it's not that big of a hardship to go through an extra step in case, and there's many lots that are smaller than these 67 and 60-foot frontages. We can't make all of them conforming, so I wouldn't think. So I think they're non-conforming for a reason, and I think it's probably a good reason. So I don't feel the need to change this part.
And Rob,
Yeah, so I think that leaving it at 75 makes it tight enough when you think about the actual use of the property and how things would need to be developed just right to be able to get around and get from front to back, because that's pretty narrow once you start figuring a little bit of buffer to the property line and even a minimal width of a house on there. I think that 60 is too tight.
Jen?
Well, I guess I'm having one of those visual things when I'm looking at this particular. And those houses, and why are they? When I walk down the streets of Bristol, they always look like they're straight to the road to me, but clearly they're not. Because to me, if they were straight to the road, the 60 wouldn't be a big deal. But looking at the way they're set up, there's really not enough room on those two particular ones. And I guess my question, we're looking at this one small block. Is this?
I would tell you it's relatively representative of the fabric of
Okay.
Bristol. Let's
This-
see, I can pop back up here. And then- So if you look at that, the block that you're looking at is, Chris can probably point it to it easier right there.
Yeah,
That one right there.
I know what it is.
Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. What we're trying to do, the reason for my suggestion is, yes, we won't get all of them, but the more that we make conforming, if we believe that the standards are reasonable, then the more opportunity we're creating.
So those are fairly similar to what you see from within Liberty, Pine, North, and West Street, that area. So basically from North Street, which is the black line right on the middle, to the west, all the way over to Liberty, this side of North Street, that's the growth pattern you see. Those are very similar. You get onto this side of North Street, it's all over the place. And I mean, all over the place.
Right. It's Liberty Street, the lots are, I think Liberty Street lots are larger, aren't they?
No, a lot,
I feel like they
the two large, a lot of those larger ones are quote unquote double lots. They're 150 feet wide.
Okay. Another question.
Melissa?
Yeah, no, I think I would like more information instead of just this sample. I'd like to know how many are non-conforming. And by making that change you suggested, how many would we bring into conforming? Because just showing a section and there's 2, there could be a section of 10 houses and there's 6. So, in this area in the village, I'd like, can we get that information before we make a decision?
I can probably get all of them for you. It's going to take a little time, but it's doable, and it's reasonably doable with GIS. So it's not. I'm not going to have to go through a map and walk, around every single one of them. We'll put basically a search into GIS, and it'll pull the parcels. So I can give you more than that, yes, if you need it.
So what do you think the advantages there, Melissa? We have a typical, and we can see the advantages or disadvantages.
The advantages of knowing
What
how
happens?
many?
What does quantity have to do with it?
Well, I mean, if changing it is going to bring 4 lots into to conform so that they can just easily build there, that's do we really want to do that? But if it brings in a pretty high number to allow that, You know what I'm saying? Is it, I guess the idea is it worth making the change? If it's only a few lots, but as opposed to being, you know,
Yes,
40% of the lots. I mean, you know,
technically you're missing one. This lot over here is only 74 feet, so technically this lot's out of conformance as well. Just to throw it out there. So
I was just saying before we make a decision on this, whenever we do that, I think it would be worth it to know how many lots changing that would bring into being conforming.
And remember,
Uh,
there are multiple dimensional standards, so there are
Right,
multiple
right.
levels of nonconformance. So for example, across the street on the low side of the map, you can see a couple of houses sticking out in pretty close to your right of way. They're out of the setback. I didn't propose to change that because they're, you know, basically they're the only two there. So I understand it's a little bit of a slippery slope, and it's also a little bit of trying to find the best solution for the most people. You're not gonna fix it for everybody, but you can make it easier for more if you choose, if it makes sense, if the dimensions make sense.
Make what easier?
Make basically developing additional density. So the purpose of this is to allow the opportunity for additional housing density within your village. And you know, the other thing is the HDR, it's your high density area. It's the place that you want density, but it's already your most dense area. And has a pretty strong fabric to it already. So I recognize that too.
Adam, again, it's Fred. Is the rule pertaining to those lots that don't conform, but they were pre-existing, is that a town rule?
No, it's a state rule.
It's a state rule. Why does the state keep on sticking its nose at everything? Because we could just say, hey, pre-existing conditions, we'll treat them as conforming. Why wouldn't that be okay?
Well, I mean, right now you have a relatively compact number of dimensional standards. If it starts making things hard for the zoning administrator to enforce if you have you know, dimensional standards that vary depending upon the time it was built and the changes to your zoning regs.
Why?
So
Why is that so hard? I mean,
well, first of all,
it's pre-existing.
So I guess the state put in, Fred, one exception. Pre-existing structures basically can be used for their current use, their actual use. They're not penalized for that, but when they want changes, basically that's when they have to go through the waiver process and for the DRB.
Okay, well, I was curious.
So, I'll just follow up with a couple comments. I'm okay either way. I would caution that there's a couple things to think about is zoning has been in force long enough, so if you buy a piece of property, not that you probably do, but the zoning has been existing long enough that you understand what the limitations are potentially with that piece of property. I think it is a little bit unreasonable to stop. Well, we're saying 3 houses on this block. There might be another one of doing anything because they don't meet front yard setback or front yard width. Virgin seems to have 7,500 feet, so it's not consistent, or would be consistent there. I'm sure, I'm trying to find members here. So we're looking at. So I would think we would want to consider not trapping somebody because it's existing. Even though, they walked into the thing as they saw it when they bought it. And the other thing is to rely on a DRB process, which is a group of people with opinions, will change over a period of time as that board changes people. So you will end up, if you don't spell it out in the regulations, you will end up with a certain amount of subjectivity by anybody going to the DRB. And you can argue whether it's reasonable or not, but it's subjectivity.
I mean, one of the communities I worked for 15 years ago, their DRB was very anti-growth, and their decisions very clearly reflected that. The DRB has turned over there, and actually the community has, because their lack of development stymied their population growth, which thus put their school district in their school in peril. As a matter of fact, their school's on a chopping block in a panic now. So it's slightly different than that, but yeah, I agree that it's DRB's, a lot of it's based on opinion, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not a kumbaya operation.
Well, being on as a member of the DRB, and I haven't been on there long, but for 2 decades, been going to DRB meetings, and I've been through a half a dozen myself as an applicant. They're not that onerous, really, and the rules are pretty well spelled out. In fact, very clearly spelled out in the regs what they need to address when they become an applicant, if they need to go through the process. And the board looks at that. I mean, I know the board has their book out and looking at the various standards and things when they're weighing the proposal. And they're trying to compare the proposition against the rules that are in black and white. I don't think the choice is between, we're not going to just stop people if they have a project that otherwise would be okay, except that they're lacking some frontage. The board, I think, is going to come in and say, oh, everything looks good, except you lack some frontage. That's a little bit of a historical, leftover hangover, and they'll see their way through.
So why wouldn't you just allow it in the first place rather than have them go to the board?
I think my point is not that. My point is that in order to sweep all the non-conforming uses in, I think that process is not so onerous that we can't, if it comes up, they'll go through that process. And if the only thing that's wrong with their proposal is that they're lacking a little frontage, I don't think the board is going to be hard on them.
So, and it also depends on the neighbors. I mean, one of the criteria is really impact on neighbor, as far as
Good.
waivers go. No, I'm saying, so the point is
Okay.
that,
So I'm hearing mixed comments. I'm hearing one person asking for more information. I'm hearing a lot of people cool about this. Is our go forward thing for more data, or do we want to table this and keep it the same? Or do we want to change it?
One quick technical question: is the setback measured from the center line of the road?
Your setback is measured from the center of the, yep, yes.
Which 16 and a half, no, 24 and a half feet is part of the right of way.
24.75 feet from the center line to the edge of the road. There are 3 rock roads.
Is North Street a 3 road or 4?
3.
So
Personally, I would like more information. I don't see how making a decision with more information usually is a better idea.
yeah, I'm just concerned about kicking the can down the road.
So-
Fred,
so-
you have your hand up?
I'm sorry.
Fred has his hand up.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I
Sorry.
was going to say, I think Melissa makes a good point. I think, Kevin, you made a good point pertaining to design review boards. Things change, things could even get personal, hypothetically. I wouldn't be against it going to 60 feet. Is that what you're proposing, Adam?
Yes.
From 45? I don't think that's a huge leap. But if the data that's collected and it's interpreted by the planning commission as, wow, and whatever that means, it would be interesting to know that, especially if Adam can get the information and, within a month. It should allow us to move forward.
Okay, I can tell you, let's see, Village in Heinsberg is generally 60-foot setback. Middlebury, 40 or 100, depending on what zoning district in particular you are in. So they're very downtown's 40. The mixed use is 100. Highway something is. If you get into the residential districts in Middlebury, well, it is, well, it's a little bit different. They are 100, but no, actually, our 12 is 60, our 20 units per acre is 100, our 12 is 60, the other two are 75. So it's neither of the answers are out of the ballpark with kind of neighboring communities that you have. So I'll get you the number of non-conforming lots for the front yard setback in your HDR.
Not setback, but frontage, correct?
Excuse me, frontage, yes. Okay. The next, I'm gonna try and do the next two together because they make some sense to be tied together, and those would be residential lot size, and it would be, again, residential density. So if you went from 10,000 to 8,000, and an acre is roughly 40,000, your residential density could increase for single family homes could increase from 4 to 5. And again, in this parcel, this representative parcel for your HDR district, I believe there are also two that are about 8,700 square feet. So over the 8,000 that I'm suggesting, but under the 10,000. So again, pre-existing non-conforming lots.
Comments? Melissa, you have your hand up? You're muted.
I have to touch my phone to move the screen and do things, so
Oh, okay.
I'll speak up if I have a question. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
I'd ask Adam to repeat that. I don't know that I understand what we're talking about here.
Okay, so let me do this. Let me get away from the picture and I'm going to go down. Can you all read that or not? Is it large enough for you to read?
Yep.
I don't want it to wander off the page too far. So I'm reading your dimensional standards, which are item C down below. You can see that your residential density, so the first of your dimensional standards is currently a maximum of 4 dwelling units per acre. Okay. The third one below that is residential lot size. It's 10,000 square feet. If an acre is roughly 40,000 square feet, it's
43,560.
43,560. All right, great, perfect. Then if you went from 10 to 8, you could theoretically fit 5 dwellings as opposed to 4. So that's why I'm suggesting that the two standards are tied to one another or can be tied to one another. Again, if I go to your the study the study lots. That's the box, excuse me. So I'm looking at the HDR, I'm looking at the first, and I'm looking at the lot size. And the 2007 study was your Forum on Sprawl study. The 2022 study is basically our study, so we re-looked at it. Basically, the range of lot sizes in that block were basically 0.2 or 8,712 square feet to 0.6 acres or 26,000 square feet. So a pretty large range. There are a couple of them, though, that are in the 8,000 low end of the range, and therefore would be non-conforming. So my suggestion to you again was, if you went to 8,000, you would bring a number of, based on our representative sample, you would bring a number of lots into conformity that are not currently in conformity. And by doing that, again, they could get a permit by right for certain uses that they can't currently get by right, that they need currently to go to the DRB for.
Does that speak at all to how many units one can have on an 8,200 square foot lot or something like that? Or does it just allow permitting to go ahead, given the other parameters that exist?
So, basically, on an 8,200 square foot lot, you could get 1 unit. On a 16,000 square foot lot, roughly, you could get 2 units. On a 24, you could get 3, and so
Okay.
on, up to basically a maximum of 5.
Well, if someone had an 82 square foot lot, modest house, and they wanted to add another unit on the back, is that permitted?
They could add an ADU. We have not talked about whether otherwise, so they could add an ADU. They could not add anything else under your current regulations. Once we get past this decision, the other question I'm going to ask you is, do you want to modify your what's allowed on a sliding scale based on whether you are allowing single family, duplex, 2-family, multifamily?
Okay.
So if somebody wanted to come in and raise an existing house, say it was just all tumbled down anyway, or it's not, they just, for whatever reason, they want to raise it. And could they put, depending on the lot size, 2 houses on that lot, that neither one would be an ADU? Would it become a multi-unit kind of situation? Or how does that?
Well, they might be able to subdivide if the lot was greater than, right now, under your current regs, greater than 20,000 square feet. If you dropped it to 8,000 square feet, if it was greater than 8,000 square feet, and they could get a septic system and basically meet all the wastewater system permits, then I guess it would be possible to subdivide it.
Not subdivide, just have 2 housing units.
No.
4.
Not without a PUD, so you could do a duplex, but you couldn't do 2 individual houses.
You could do 1 building that's 4 units
Yes, do
or
multi-house.
5.
No, because right now your
No.
units are tied. Basically, your units are 4 units per acre. So roughly a unit per 10,000 square feet.
So anything over a duplex is a multifamily, and it requires a conditional use currently with our regs. So if you had,
Except under S100, that would change. Because we
Yes.
could not hold multi-units to a higher standard than the single family home. So,
Under S100, it would.
correct, multi-units and multi-families could not be held to a standard than a single family home. Yes, that's in the law. I mean, the last reading I saw, I don't know how it's been amended maybe at this point, but that's in the original bill. I have it outlined.
So if there is a lot that is at this point, that stays the same, it's 20,000. Can someone cut that in half and sell half of it and a home be built there
Potentially,
on each
there are,
lot?
potentially, yes. There are other, you have your wastewater considerations.
Right. If you meet all the other, yeah.
But the answer would be yes.
But as
Or they
one
could
lot,
not subdivide it and build a 4-unit single
Yeah.
building. If they have this, square footage, depends on how much
Two
acres.
units, single building. Under your current regs, they could build 2 units.
If they have an acre, they could build 5 or 4.
If they had an acre under your current regs, they could build 4.
She said 20,000 square feet. Dawn.
Right.
For example.
Yes.
So
Would then,
that's a
excuse
question.
me,
That's a
would
question.
those 4 units also then get to have ADUs? in time?
No,
yeah,
because an ADU is only for single family residence.
Apparently not.
So they would need to be subdivided or something like this?
You can, currently, you can only attach an ADU to a single family residence. So you couldn't attach an ADU to each unit of a multifamily residence.
No, I'm sorry. If somebody had for whatever the footage ends up being, but if you're saying 8,000 feet, let's say I have a 16,000 square foot place, 2 homes could be built on that potentially, correct?
Yes.
And then
Subdivided
there
into
could be
2
2
parcels.
more homes built on that qualifying as ADUs.
Mhm.
But there
You
could
got
be 2
4
more
homes
ADUs,
there.
yes.
Okay, so you end up 4 homes on 16,000 square feet.
4 units, yes. You'd have 2 original separate units, each on an 8,000 square foot lot, and each of them could possibly develop an ADU, yes.
But
The
to
big
clarify,
thing you're gonna run into is wastewater.
Slim, it's not a 16,000 square foot lot. You can't put more than one dwelling unit on a.
Subdivide them.
Right, it'd have to be
On a-
subdivided.
You'd have to subdivide it, you'd have 2 8,000 square foot.
That's
lots.
right. That's right. Well, I guess my feeling is that we need to be careful on how much density we ask for. When we haven't even experienced the possibilities of ADUs, and not really, we've had some experience and it hasn't all been so great, but we could be a little careful. I mean, the laws can change again. I just leaning toward a little careful before we get too crowded. That's all. Thank you.
So,
Chris-
just to answer your question, or kind of illustrate your question, this is from the study that Kevin and Chris did. So we mapped it. So they went out and they looked at where are there existing duplexes, ADUs, and multifamily homes in Bristol currently. And that's what this map shows. The key unfortunately falls right off the edge. Hold on. So ADUs are in purple, duplexes are in green, and multifamily units, 3 or more, are in blue. And you can see the numbers inside the units. So most of them are 3. Most of the multifamily units are 3s and 4s, although there are a couple 5, 6s in there.
So I will add that this is not complete, a
Yeah.
complete survey. This is maybe 40, 50%, maybe 60% tops.
Yeah.
And are all those non-conforming? Or are some of those conforming?
Most,
So we'd expect that most of them would conform, that the ADUs had been permitted, that the duplexes were permitted, and that no?
No.
Oh, they're
A
pre-existing?
lot of this is pre-existing.
I'd say 90% of these were pre-existing.
Well, okay.
We've seen very little new growth in this category in the village.
Okay, I stand corrected. So, right, your zoning reg, this is an example then of your zoning regs making things harder than it originally was. To get more density, more housing.
One of my concerns with the increased density and these lower minimums is how tight it would potentially be when you look at those, 60-foot lots that we were looking at for the frontage, that those lots along Taylor Ave on the end of that could both be potentially broken into 2 lots each, and then you have 4 lots there with potentially 2 units on each because they potentially meet the minimum dimensional standards for that. And that gets really, really tight in a hurry, especially as limited as the infrastructure is with the street widths, the parking, and everything else. And understanding that there's minimum areas needed for wastewater system without municipal wastewater in the town. I understand that that's a limiting factor for what is actually possible to do with a lot of these lots. But I think that that's getting a little too tight in my mind for keeping it somewhat the same character.
Chris? I have a question.
Yeah.
The Livingston property on the Plank Road, which is quite a significant apartment building. I know it's not on the diagram that we saw. I think it's still within the light green anyway. How did that proceed from a zoning standpoint? Was it all good use and all that kind of stuff?
I went through the zoning board of adjustment at the time for
It had to
approval.
do that? It had
Yes,
to do
sir.
that? Yeah.
Yep.
Because those are the types of units that I think that can make a big difference, quite frankly. Now, whether you put them in the green area, I don't know how practical that would be, given the most of the lot sizes there, but it certainly becomes more practical just on the edges, I would think. And the other thing I think about with the housing that we're trying, our goal here, from everything I've read and understood, Vermont's population is not changing a lot, but we have more households because there's an awful lot of 1-person and 2-person situations. And, sure, there's single people that live in a single family home, but I think a lot of the housing that we might be looking towards would be smaller units that would accommodate the single man or the single woman or a single mom and that type of a thing. And apartment units that could be built on a space like the Livingstons on the Plank Road, where you could get, I don't know how many units there are, 16 there, I have no clue. Where you could get a significant number on one modestly small footprint, wrestling on how we change the character of the village, assuming there's an interest in doing that, and I don't know that there is. I don't know how much we're going to benefit the housing scenario. That's just my humble opinion on these things. Duplexes, I think, are a good idea, quite frankly. But I think when you start getting into a lot more units on a quarter of an acre or something like that, I think in the village, the downtown area, I think that's tough.
I mean, I look at some of the existing examples where you've got 4-6 units to a building right in your village, in our village currently, that have minimal impact. I look at Doug Beam's building on the corner of Maple and Pleasant. You've got what used to be the Ladue apartment complexes on Mountain Street. Pleasant Hills, the senior living facility there. You've got Rod Kuzno, I think that's a 4-unit.
Pleasant Street, yeah.
On Pleasant Street. So there's a lot of 4-unit apartment buildings surrounding our community as we stand today.
A lot of those,
So-
Chris, were there originally, that Victorian or whatever you want to call it there, the
Mhm.
6-unit one on Maple and Pleasant, that building is 100 years old probably. And I don't know how old the Cousineau property is, but it's pre-zoning, I know that. And Ladue, I think, is also, and that, that was developed probably before zoning. So all those I don't know that we're talking the same variety of apples here.
So, yeah, I mean, the concern is quite often with debt, my point is you couldn't build those units today if you wanted to. And the impact that they seem to have on the area are nominal. That's my point, is that just looking at examples where you have multifamily units right inside of the village and what the impacts of those are by having higher density in that structure isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I do agree with you. How many lots are available that would accommodate 6 apartment units in the area that we are looking at here? There may be a few, but there aren't a lot of building lots available in the village until you get out towards the Plank Road or up North Street, or perhaps down along South Street in the basin down there. There are spots, but
So
a lot of the real land exists as you start to move just outside of the dark green that you're talking about. When I look at all the grids there, you know what I'm saying?
So I think we need to refocus on the fact that we are discussing only HDR right now, which is that
Currently.
dark
Right,
green.
right.
We'll
exactly.
also have the same discussion for your mixed district, which is, I'll call it the kind of the gray or the brown crosshatched. The low density village district, which is I'll call it light blue. And the the ROC, residential office commercial, which is the orange along the road. So yes, we're starting here because we had to start somewhere, but we will be talking about all of those as well. So you'll have other opportunities to have these discussions. So that's your rock district. That's one of your mixed districts. And that's a portion of the Plank Road section of the low density village area.
I think making the minimum for a lot smaller, I don't know, it seems to me it kind of makes sense because homes are getting a lot smaller. If somebody's gonna build a home in a village, I doubt they're looking to build a 3,000 square foot house or even 2. People are really going for smaller homes.
Not the
So
developers, though.
Correct.
no, I'm talking about if someone is, okay, I see what you're saying, but if somebody wants to build, if it goes to 8,000 and they have 16,000 square feet and they're looking to build, is a developer going to want to buy an 8,000 square foot lot? Is that a typical thing that they would be looking for, a developer?
It depends on scope and scale. Yeah, I mean, we've got one that was bought up just before the pandemic on North Street. That they wanted to do more, but the max they could do is a duplex on it.
Mhm.
So we small scale folks that are trying to develop land, you wedge as much as you can in.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like it opens up more opportunity for people to build smaller homes.
Shannon, do you have any thoughts?
I actually I think the 8,000 is actually a really bad idea for the village area, for that high density area.
So the question being we changed to 8,000 and 5 units per acre.
Yes.
Kind of a related question. I'm not hearing anything Joe here necessarily.
I could be a lot more supportive of this densifying change and lots of others, because I'm a big supporter of density. I have trouble supporting these kinds of things if the consensus that I've heard from the board currently on having any review that mitigates the impact of the density that we're inviting. If we're gonna say you can have more density, but we're not gonna regulate it, I have a lot of trouble accepting density. If you say we're gonna make the density fit in, we're gonna have systems to make that work, I'm gonna be your biggest advocate for density. So I'm torn because I hear generalized drift towards more density. That is pleasing to me, because I support that as a concept. But, based on our prior conversations at other meetings, I deciphered a majority of lack of support for doing anything to mitigate the impact of that density by, requiring some sort of review or what have you, what we've talked about before.
But wouldn't new homes still have to meet the current standards? It's not like we say
Well,
here.
there aren't any current
Well,
standards
I
in
think-
Bristol. We ask them if they meet the setbacks, if they meet the height requirement, they can get a septic permit, and that's it.
Mhm.
John's talking
Okay.
about light, noise and other things that
Right.
are very hard to regulate.
Well, they're
Right.
not hard to regulate. They're regulated all the time. The state, for example, in this bill that's under consideration, finds it perfectly fine to allow towns to have higher standard review for parking plans for ADUs and multifamilies. But they don't give us any leeway. I mean, that concedes the point that things like that are reviewable and desirable to be reviewed. I just want to make sure that the density we invite is a density we can all live with. And by that, I mean, not just the neighbors, but, the whole town, because we all have a stake in it. In the town's future.
So we got one maybe, one yes. On this,
Yes.
there's two yeses. One maybe.
I would be a no for this change right now.
Okay, one no, one maybe. and two
What do we
yeses.
go, what are we now and we want to go to 8,000 and we are where now?
10,004 units and going to 8,005 units.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
You from Rob?
Rob, what do you think?
Initially I'd say no. It seems a little tight for me, but I haven't thought about how it would relate to actually laying out some lots. Can you do it with our current 75 foot to break it up and make it fit? And does it fit all right? Or do you need to lower everything else to make that work?
I didn't get a yes or no, or maybe out of that.
My initial thoughts, no, Kevin.
Okay,
Perfect.
so we got three yeses, two nos, and one maybe. We're undecided,
How do you count me?
undecided. So John is undecided, Slim and Rob are saying no. And I heard a yes from Fred and Melissa and Shannon.
I'm a no unless we commit to some sort of protections to provide people a review. That's all. I can support a lot of this stuff, all of this stuff we talked about tonight, but not under the current conditions.
So that's 3 and 3, and I haven't said anything yet.
To make a change, you need a majority of
Yeah.
9, which is 5. And it doesn't look like you're gonna get there.
Well, that's true. Well. Okay. So. In your case, Rob, you were lacking information. Is it an extensive data dump, or is it just a matter of thinking about it?
No. So in my mind, to make the 8,000 work, you need to lower the other standards that I am not in favor of lowering as far as the front yard setback. Because if you look at a lot with a minimum depth of about 150 feet, you couldn't do, if you do 75 feet by 150 feet, you are over that 8,000. So, how it does, you would have to lower other standards, I think. And that's,
I would tell you, Rob, you could do a 70, a 75 by a 75 doesn't get you to 8,000.
but, for those, is that then gonna create island lots in the middle of these blocks? Just taking a look at that example that you have on the screen there. I was using 150 on the northwest corner there as the number without putting interior lots in. That's typically not how things have been developed.
So let me ask you this, and I don't know what the answer will be, but this would make projects like Bristol Commons probably easier, where they took a bunch of lots, put them together, did a PUD, and basically meshed kind of things into your existing fabric. And I don't know which way that cuts for this board.
Over here,
Yeah.
the co-housing,
Your co-house.
that's like the best kind of development we could have wished for on those 3 acres. I mean, densifying, creating all those units. Attractive, brought a lot of people to town, created a ton of housing.
So
Far exceeds the energy standard, all those kinds of things. I mean, you couldn't, I wish for better infill development than that, in my opinion.
So I would tell you that this would enable that somewhat.
It would also enable, buyers to come in and buy up single family homes and put a couple of, multifamilies on there or something.
Depending on the size of the lot, it's possible, maybe.
Yeah, that's the trend. That's what's happening in America. Hedge funds are buying, but they're the biggest buyers of single family homes in America today. And they're not buying them to live in. They're buying them to either develop them with more density so they can then rent them and make more money, or they just rent them. Luckily in Vermont, they've overlooked that because there's a lot of easy picking in the Sun Belt where things are cheaper and there's more growth and that sort of thing. But it's just a matter of time before institutional investors find us, start buying up our single family homes and building multifamilies on it. I think we want to protect against that.
Okay, so we are at an impasse. I guess we keep it to. We don't have enough votes if you look at the entire board, which we have 2 members missing tonight. Weigh in on that. We keep it the same.
So this basically is, in some instances, just making it so there's just going to be empty land in the middle of the village that's just going to sit there.
Well, Adam
Unless
alluded-
someone builds an ADU on their property,
Yeah.
a little home.
Adam alluded to how we want to handle duplexes or multifamilies if there's a discount there, but short of that, that also precludes a lot of that as well.
So just for example, on this map you're looking at right now, back to my lot, this one here. Where my mouse went. I lost it. There it is, right here in the center. I have 4/10 of an acre. If you did what you were saying, I could subdivide that lot and put another between my house and the house to the east of me. It's a big empty piece of green space. It would be a good spot to infill the village, but I can't do it now. I only have 4/10 of an acre. I can't, so there isn't enough dirt for me to, if I wanted to. Trust me, I bought it that size on purpose because that's the green space I personally want. I'm just using it as an example because I know the numbers. So that's the kind of lot where it is a fairly oversized lot compared to its surroundings. Most of the lots in the village were designed around 1/4 acre concept. That was what the vision was. Most lots would try to be a 1/4 acre. So lowering that density would give us the chance to infill that, the one behind it as well. That's actually a multifamily at the moment, but
I mean, you could infill that with a multi-unit or an ADU.
On my land,
Yeah, I'm reading,
I couldn't do.
I'm reading
multifamily.
your, on the other side, on the, what is it, the east side of your driveway, that's yours too,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's all
yeah.
mine. It's
Yeah.
big empty. I couldn't do a multifamily there, because the density only allows one dwelling unit per quarter acre. I only have a little over a quarter acre. If we dropped it to 1/5 of an acre, that would put it at 0.2 acres. My 0.4 acres then would allow me to have, I could put another dwelling unit without going through the accessory dwelling unit bullshit that we go through. I'm sorry to be blunt about it, but I've been advocating this from the beginning, that we need to look at how do we grow existing parcels correctly, which is if we do, unfortunately, state screwed up duplexes, because I was hoping to be able to do duplexes with a site plan, but S100 removes it, doesn't it? It treats duplexes, it forces you to treat duplexes the same way you treat single families.
That's correct, I think.
Right, it forces you to treat duplexes like any single families, so you don't.
Right, currently you could.
No, site plan review generally is for not 1 or 2 single family dwellings currently.
I thought you could do that against a duplex. Do you want to?
I don't believe so. I think but that's the next place that I was going to go is. If you are not, and I guess I'll go there, Kevin, if there's not the will of the board to change the lots, make the lot sizes a little smaller or the residential density a little bigger for single family homes, would you be interested in making the residential density a little more dense for either duplex, 2-family or multifamily? And if multifamily, how many, what size, and what scale? So, just as an example, if you currently allow 4 structures per or 4 dwelling units per acre, would you change that to, for duplexes, call it 6 or 8, depending on what density you wanted? Would you allow extra density if someone's developing a duplex, which is, I think, where Chris wants to go?
If we can protect the neighbors. We want to have a review for it, sure, I would support that under those conditions, not if it's wild, wild west and you check 3 things and then they get to build whatever they want, no.
So
who else? Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Slim, how about you?
Well, I'm like John on this, in that I'm a bit nervous about what'll happen, of course, after seeing the Garfield resident, and I think there could be those kinds of unintended consequences unless we have some kind of regulation on what can be done more than just, as you said, lot size, etc. It could really impact a lot of our neighbors in a negative way, I'm afraid. And I would like the density as well, but I think it has to come with some regulation, some oversight.
Hey, Rob?
So
You share from.
no,
I'm undecided on this. I feel strongly about the risk of change of character going away from owner occupied dwellings, which I feel duplexes tend to do a little more, become rental units.
Okay. Melissa?
Well, I mean, I really don't have an issue with there being more rental units. But as far as what John was saying, that it used to be there was no zoning. So there were no rules. And then we made some rules. So I'm not opposed at all, if we're increasing density, to bring in a few more rules. I think as you go, you have more people in a space, you sort of are going to need to have some more rules. So I like the idea of the 8,000, and yet right now, yes, everything would probably be fine, but in the future, we have no idea what's going to happen and who's going to be buying the properties. So I think I must have missed something about the discussion about some new zoning rules, like John said, like noise and light and all of that. Because I don't understand why we're not talking about that. I must have missed that.
So, actually, on your screen right now, this is the Vermont statutes online. And it's on site plan review, and site plan review is the review that generally governs things like lights and noise and parking and access and et cetera. And if you read the first line, as a prerequisite to the approval of any use other than 1 and 2 family dwellings, the approval of site plans by the appropriate municipal panel may be required. So basically, it's exempted 1 and 2 family dwellings and ADUs from site plan, which is what John's talking about. So I'm not really sure that we have the ability to do what John is suggesting for single family dwellings, duplexes, or ADUs. We can do it for, you can do it for multifamily dwellings.
Okay, I see.
S100 will prevent us from treating even 3 and 4 units any different than a single family home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then we lose more power, more local control, and we just
Well,
hope that the developers have a
So,
goodwill.
so let me put it a different way. You're allowing people to use their property to a higher use as opposed to infringing on it by.
How'd that work for you, Fred?
I can't.
I'm trying to understand the size of the lots relative to the units that are available. We just discussed, and I think we had approved, that an ADU added on to an additional single family lot is 900 square foot. Now, using Chris's example with his, or maybe I use an example of 0.4 acres, so it's less than a half an acre. And hypothetically, then he might be able to put, would a lot like that have an ADU, or could someone just build another 1,800 square foot home or something like that on it, Adam?
So under your current regulations, is my understanding with basically a 0.4 acre lot, no, 0.2 acre lot. 0.4 acre, 0.4 acre lot, excuse me. Under your current regulations, it's smaller than a half acre, so someone could build an ADU there if they had the wastewater and the parking and the other requirements. They could not subdivide the lot or build a duplex.
Okay. Okay, and that makes some sense to me, especially within the village, taking lots that are, most of them aren't 0.4, but there are some that exist for sure, and allowing additional units, because I think there's all kind of problems that could come surrounding that. Additional units, meaning another single family type home, something large. I would love to think about this question a little bit more, so that I can understand it a little bit better. We're just talking about the high density village, and I really don't know how many properties will be impacted by this in a substantial way, different than the way things exist today, other than maybe making unit lots that don't comply, give them a little bit easier road to travel down the road a piece. But Ms. Hernandez, I think, makes a good point. I'm down here in Florida in a 311 unit condo. They've got rules up the yin yang. They do, because we're all living close to each other. And you have to have rules and guidance, because people can't just do what they darn well please. As well, it serves people pretty well, and they accept most of these things. If we do potentially increase the density of the village by 20%, it's quite possible that one would want to do, whether it's a design review board or other things within zoning, that just make sure people live or have developed things in a fashion that works for their neighbors, that works for the community. It's difficult road, but I don't want to see the Bristol Village change dramatically just because the state wants to build a lot of high density residential in a very small piece of a town that is significantly bigger than that piece. Right from the get-go, I've disagreed with the state on their development. You're going to have people moving out of the village and building homes in the pucker brush if they don't like the high density residential things that they run into. People do that. So I think we do need to be careful how we go ahead. And I like the idea of addressing some of these things with encouraging more duplexes and the like. And also looking outside of the immediately unit that we're looking now, where there's a lot more potential for some significant housing to be added if you're really serious about doing it. I go back to what I said before. I kind of rambled on a little bit there, but it's something I feel strongly about. Higher density in the village means more rules if you want to make it work, or you're going to have an exit from the village for an awful lot of folks.
See, Shannon,
Okay, we've been on a lot of topics, so,
So the question before you is whether or not you would like to increase the density for duplexes and or multifamily units, but let's just start with duplexes.
for duplexes, yes, I guess on the multifamily, that I do think when you start getting to 4 or 5 units, I do agree with John, those do need a little bit more scrutiny. When you start, that's a little bit more. That gets a little more complicated, but the duplexes, to me, is no different than the single family.
so. Yes. I'm hearing requests for data. And I'm also hearing a lot of reservation or concern about things going awry. So I guess the next step is to develop some data.
I think what I'm gonna do for you is, rather than this representative sample, I'll come back with more data about the entire HDR, high density residential district. So you've got, I've got to talk with Hannah, my GIS person, and see how easy, difficult it is to do. But I think I can get you more data for, lot sizes and,
Well, that was when I was gonna actually ask if you could provide the number of existing lots that could be subdivided under the current quarter acre zoning. And what would the increase be if you went to 1/5 acre zoning?
okay, so I can
Does that
talk
make
to her
sense?
about a build out.
Because I think,
And different build outs, that's just starts getting into it. It takes time to do these things.
well, because I mean, all the data's there, like through, like the lot sizes were all there.
So I will gather some more data for you for next meeting on the HDR. Right now, I will assume that we're not doing any of the changes.
I'm hearing that as well. I guess the only one we've got that we haven't discussed is moving accessory dwelling building from 1,000 to 900. That means,
Right, and that was just to line it up with the change that you all made to your ADUs.
so I think at this point, and rather than, and maybe it's just easy to analyze that way, but I would say if you could ban lot sizes today, so you've got, I don't know, 0.2 acres or less, and then 0.2 to 0.4 acres, and then 0.4 to 6 to point, and kind of group those in there. if there's some ease in doing it that way. That would that satisfy the question about where our lot sizes are, or?
Easy. Is my question is, I mean, if we're only talking a dozen total parcels in this, are we, is this a exercising?
Utility.
Yeah,
Especially when they could come and get a pretty easy
So there's-
dispensation. If they need it.
There's two issues here. Is one is exactly that. And the other is the semantics of if and what happens with the legislature with this current bill.
Yeah.
It may make this whole discussion moot.
Yes, it could.
As we could spend all this time and then
And
have.
apparently, all I know is that it's moving a lot, like as it gets closer to possible passage, things are coming and going, coming and going. Who knows?
Don't hear anybody resisting it like.
It's gonna pass. I would, if I were prognosticating,
gonna
I say it's
pass.
gonna pass in some form, but I don't know all the details.
Yeah. It's gonna pass one way or another, in one form. or another.
and what they're bickering over right now is the Act 250 verbiage, none of this stuff that we're concerned about.
Okay.
I have a
Okay.
question, and it's probably a stupid one, but I just don't know for sure. When someone sells a home in the village here, I would assume they're required to disclose that it does not meet current zoning laws. Is that right?
It's possible that lenders, if you're getting a loan from bank X, the bank might ask for some,
Right.
confirmation of zoning status or whatever.
So we, because of the Bianchi laws, we provide a certificate of compliance upon request.
So that compliance statement says to whomever, like this thing is in the zoning. and-
That there are no zoning violations, not that the lot's out of compliance. So if there's if somebody built something illegally on the property, that would be a known issue. So, but like those current homes that are on non-conforming lots,
Would that be,
that would
Noticed.
that would not be notified, because that's not a violation. It's all they're asking for is zoning
Right, I
violations.
I think it's
So
up
it's
to the
up-
buyer.
Up
do
to
that
the
for them,
buyer to
right?
make sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
they
thanks.
ask for it on a lot of refis
Yes.
and sales. So I trust me, in Bristol alone last year, I did almost 100 of them.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then the other thing
refund.
is
Just certificates of compliance.
typically they would be going through a deed search on the property.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the same
Okay.
thing, so.
Depending on the banker.
Yeah.
Some of them. are
I guess-
tight.
If you're
And
buying a
most of them
house
buy
that's,
cash.
if you're buying a house in a place where the houses are, over 100 years old, you should do your due diligence.
Yeah, I know. I had a friend who was building a house 5 years ago over in Waterbury. And they wanted to build like a small, tight house and 2 bedrooms. And the bank would not lend them the money unless they had 3 bedrooms and an additional
Yeah.
bath. It was really
Should
weird.
we move
Okay,
to
so-
adjourn?
Yeah, I was just gonna add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, so the next step is we will go to public comment. Is there any comment from the public?
Lost.
No, it looks like he's given up on it.
Jimmy fell out of his chair.
Okay, if no public comment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Shannon,
Second.
okay, all those want to approve that, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, we will adjourn at 8:41.
Have a good night, all.
All right. Hopefully my computer works next time.